This room. We're going to keep having an eye on this, but in the meantime, let's speak with the chief strategist for Republicans overseas UK, Erol Morkoc. Erol Morkoc, thank you very much for joining us. What do you think we can expect to hear from Donald Trump in some moments' time?
I think it's going to touch on some of maybe the rhetoric that's been going on, and or perhaps some of the minor but noted instances of fraud. And by fraud, I mean there was fire thrown into ballot drop boxes, burning ballot drop boxes. There have been isolated incidents that have been caught. So I'm not saying there's widespread fraud. I'm not trying to say that, but there has been early indicators. Maybe he's going to touch on that. But I think maybe he's going to come out and bring out some agenda policy too. He could be looking at removing that income tax on a majority of Americans. Perhaps he'll have a more built out version of his international tariff idea, or otherwise he might be just here to tone down some of the rhetoric that's been, thrown his way. They've been calling us Nazis. They've been calling him Hitler. And at some point, that needs to be confronted in a mature adult way. And maybe this is the time that it's going to be done before the election. I'm not sure. It's gotten out of hand.
Is Mr. Trump necessarily the person that you would most associate with the words mature and adult?
Actually, I would. He's somebody who's gone through his whole life in the arena. A lot of people who are mature and adult and appear in leadership positions oftentimes are cowards, people who don't actually get into the mix. So Donald Trump is somebody who's not afraid to play the actual game of life, and in doing so, people start to brand you as immature, as though you should sit back. And one of the great criticisms of Trump is, oh, if he just gave his money to a money manager and did nothing for 70 years, he'd be richer. And you know what that would be? That would be a lifetime of nothing. So Donald Trump is somebody who gets into it, and we respect him. We look at him as an authoritative leadership figure. He will be the president of the United States, and I think he's a mature leader and somebody who's gone through the arena and through the tested gauntlet to be able to claim that title rather than just some talking head in a suit like myself.
And Errol, we are just watching live Mar-a-Lago, waiting for Trump to arrive. He will be very shortly. But Donald Trump, he's based quite a lot of his election campaign on illegal migration. Is that the #1 issue for Republicans at the moment?
I think it's 1 and 2 with the economy, but it's right up there, especially if you're on a border state, especially if you've been impacted by illegal immigration, whether it's been something you've seen or something that's actually impacted your family. There's a close family friend of ours. His wife was killed by a drunk driver who was an illegal immigrant. Now, did that person try to kill his wife? No, but that person wasn't supposed to be here. So you better believe that that gentleman's #1 issue is going to be the border. And, he's not somebody who normally would have that, but there's been, 10, 20 million people coming in, creating all sorts of interactions that have overwhelmed social services as well. And so those are the kind of things that I think probably the voters are going to look to as well. But there's an exact line. The illegal immigration, the open border, and the economic decline are one and the same. You can't have one without the other. You can't have open borders and a functioning social network. You can't have a functioning social network and open borders. So all of those together really are what are putting the kibosh on the American dream for people on the bottom. Now, people on the top, they're having no problem. 9 out of 10 Americans don't own stocks. The 10% of people who own stocks and in assets that can go up with inflation, they're fine. But the 90% of Americans, those are the ones who are going to look at the border and economy as 1-to-1 issues.
They may well indeed, but they will also look at the economy, about the price of goods, many of which are imported. And you referenced it earlier, Errol, that Donald Trump might need to flesh out more his tariff plan. At the moment, it seems as if he wants to apply 10% tariffs on all imports from every country, friend or foe. That would mean a British exporter selling to America would have higher tariffs imposed on them under Trump than currently is the case. I mean, doesn't this put the kibosh on the idea of a UK-US trade deal?
At first glance, I concur with your analysis. However, one thing with Trump is you got to understand he's a deal maker. This is where he's starting from. And one thing that everybody can be confident with Donald Trump is he hates unilateral agreements. He hates it more than anything. He's killed every single one he's ever come into contact with, and all he wants to do is bilateral agreements. So the idea that a 10% blanket tax goes as the first port of negotiation, then we have to take it aside. Which countries share our values? Which countries do we want to work with? Which countries are good allies to us? And the UK and the the U.S. are 1-1, special friendship, probably the greatest alliance on earth. So the idea that they would be subject to the same rules we might put on China, I don't think would happen. But he might start there, especially with the Labor government in charge. It's a good negotiating tactic.
Yeah, how's Donald Trump doing with women? Of course, there's not only one type of voter that is a woman. We all vote differently, I'm sure. But Kamala Harris has fiercely gone after the female vote, hasn't she? How's Donald Trump doing there?
So one thing that's really exciting for us, and that I urge your viewers to fact check, is to go and look at the propensity of married women who vote for Donald Trump. And when it comes to married women, we are not losing at all. When it comes to single women, yes, we are getting clobbered 70-30, and there's not a lot we can do there. There's a long cultural explanation for that. Donald Trump, however, definitely has half of the married women vote. As well, you know, women delivered the White House to Joe Biden, white suburban women especially. So they're a very powerful voting bloc and somebody who Donald Trump respects. And I think Donald Trump making a push and saying, hey, I'm not going to put a blanket abortion ban. That's not who I am. He's actually quite a progressive person. He was a registered Democrat until 2008. On the issue of abortion especially, he bucks with the conservative right wing, the Christian wing of the party. So I think the outreach to single women, that's going to be pretty tough to do.
Why is that? Why do single women think the Republicans aren't, you know, there for them? What is
abortion? Everything's come down to abortion. They've sort of created a situation where now, like for example, I'm a Republican spokesperson. Nobody that I know in the Republican Party is anti-abortion in the sense that it's portrayed on TV. That's under, let's say, the age of 50. So there's a lot of people in the Republican Party who don't feel the same way about abortion, and the Democrat Party has been able to kind of put us all into one basket and say,
Erol,
everybody's
haven't they been able to do that because there were people close to Donald Trump from a think tank called the Heritage Foundation that wrote up a document called Project 2025 that does include suggestions that are incredibly restrictionist around abortion, that does float the idea of a national abortion ban?
They did, and while the Heritage Foundation has done some good work, that work wasn't good work, and that wasn't work that Donald Trump endorsed. The Heritage Foundation is a think tank that does a lot of analyses, and this one, whatever it is, and this one was not in our favor, nor was it a good idea. It was very restrictive, it was draconian, and it's something that I don't think the majority of Trump voters want. The Mike Pence wing of the Trump party might want that, but those guys are long gone. We love having, you know, the Christians and the Muslims and the Jewish people who are of faith in our party, but their faith belief don't dictate the way the state goes. And I think Donald Trump's kept that separation very, very stern.
On that point, Erol, you do mention Muslim voters there. It was extraordinary to see in the last couple of days in Michigan, Muslim leaders coming out and endorsing Donald Trump after he met with them. Kamala Harris did not meet with these Muslim leaders. They endorsed Donald Trump. I mean, has everyone got such short a memory as to forget that in 2015-16, one of the most controversial proposals that catapulted Donald Trump to the front page back when he was just a candidate in the nomination process, his national ban on Muslim immigration?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because there's two sides of it. Number one, I'm an immigrant to the United States of America from a Muslim country, from Turkey. And when he didn't say a Muslim ban, that was a ban on 7 countries that Obama had already banned. Now, he did say, I want to stop all Muslims coming here. But when he said that in a moment of emotion. And everybody who's come from a Muslim country, who's fled or had to leave a situation, who didn't want to live under that, they understood what he was talking about. Now, did he do well in the Muslim vote the first time around, the second time around? Not really. But Muslim people are conservative people. They're family people. They share conservative values at their core. So the idea that the Islamic vote has gone with the LGBTQ, like gays for Palestine. It's very bizarre turn of events, and the idea that that would turn back to a more 50-50 kind of situation is what we're seeing, especially in Dearborn, which is a lovely place in Michigan that has great restaurants and great people and great patriots, and there's fifth and sixth generation Arab Americans living there. And so those people don't want to be castigated by, hardcore rhetoric, and they certainly don't see Donald Trump's single comment as indicative of who he is. Look at the Abraham Accords. If you go to Turkey right now, there's a Trump tower. If you go to Oman, there's a Trump golf course. Dubai, there's a Trump golf course. He does business with Arabs. What he doesn't like is terrorism, and what he doesn't like is unknown people coming across the border. So I think Muslim voters are smart enough not to take just one word, just as Puerto Rican voters are smart enough not to listen to some random comedian's one-off joke, turn them off. I think the voters are sophisticated enough. This is the third cycle, and they want the same results they saw from the first Trump presidency.
Yeah, and I guess people are complicated. They vote for all sorts of different reasons, and there will be no perfect candidate for every single person in the United States, I'm sure. People will vote Kamala Harris because they absolutely don't want Donald Trump, for example, not because they have any passion towards Kamala Harris in particular. But which states, so in a week's time, which states should we be watching very closely indeed?
Michigan for sure. Michigan is, Pennsylvania is the obvious one. You win Pennsylvania, you kind of take it. But there's a whole belt there, and if you win Michigan, that means you've got the union vote. That means you've got the Arab vote, and those indicators will kind of carry across the rest of the swing states. We think a place like Virginia is in play. And why? Trump lost Virginia, but then Glenn Youngkin won Virginia, the Republican governor. And one thing he's done is he's taken the Virginia election system off digital, only to paper ballots. So now Virginia numbers are coming in. Virginia is in play. New Hampshire is in play. Please keep an eye on New Hampshire. We are I think, tied exactly in New Hampshire. And I mean, that's a left-wing, stalwart, blue kind of place. But, there's a lot of hunters up there. There's a lot of, good patriotic Americans, people who believe in the Jeffersonian ideals of how this country was founded, and they look to Donald Trump as perhaps protecting that. If you look in the South, I mean, you can't go wrong with looking at North Carolina. Georgia, obviously, we think we've got it, but, Kamala's there. She's fighting us strongly. They're sort of trying to make an inroad into Texas. I wouldn't take a lot of credence on it, but maybe interesting to watch in the Senate race. But that's where I'd be focusing on Election Day.
Well, as you're rightly pointing out, there are many, many more elections than just that for president. Of course, there are some gubernatorial races, there are congressional races, senatorial races as well, all tied together. You mentioned some of these swing states. It's remarkable the focus there has been on Pennsylvania in particular, perhaps the most populous of all the states deemed to be swing states with, 20 electoral votes. There has been an enormous amount of activity in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump doing rallies, Elon Musk doing rallies, Democrats, senior Democrats going there. Kamala Harris actually U-turning on her position on fracking, mainly due to the Pennsylvania voters. Could it be that state that matters above all others?
I think so, and I think it's going to be one of the great failings of the Democrat Party to have removed Scranton, Pennsylvania, Joe Biden from the ticket, because Joe Biden delivered Pennsylvania in 2020, and Hillary Clinton did not in 2016. And if you look at the demographics of Pennsylvania, one thing that's never been a voting bloc, even though people don't think about it, is men. Men have been usually split, 54-46, 52-48. And to be a voting bloc that actually has weight as a group, you need to be a 60-40 kind of thing. And a lot of people in Pennsylvania, in coal country, blue-collar men of all races, and I guess genders now, they all have, started to start voting. These are our low propensity voters. The early voting for Trump has been out of this world high numbers. And I mean, still below the Democrats, but the Democrats usually build this big firewall before the election is what they call it. And so a place like Pennsylvania, where fracking is on the line, where you have that sort of Rust Belt degradation that people resent, they resent the 50 years of empty government promises. When you look at the fact there was an assassination attempt of President Trump in Pennsylvania. I mean, the state has become the most flashpoint hot button place. And if you win those electoral votes, it's almost impossible to lose the election.
And just to remind our viewers and listeners that we are in Mar-a-Lago here live, waiting for President Trump to arrive in his ballroom to hold this press conference. This is at his resort and residence there. It looks like there are several hundred people in the room there waiting for him. There's been quite a lot of movement in the room. Every time we look at the door, there seems to be different people coming through there. But Donald Trump is expected to arrive very soon.
Yes, indeed. He seems to be slightly late to his press conference. But, Errol, I suppose this is not out of the ordinary for Donald Trump.
No, it's his house, right? So maybe they're late.
Yeah.
Well, of course, but getting back to the point of this particular press conference, we've seen rally after rally after rally. Why now a press conference not in a stadium, not with tens of thousands of people in attendance? Why here? Why now?
Well, it's a grand location. It's the summer White House in before Trump bought it, for example. It's couldn't be better set design. I mean, if we want to speculate, Steve Bannon was just released from prison. He's been a political prisoner of the Biden regime for the last 90 days or so. Potentially, this would be something to do with that, something to do with Donald Trump. Perhaps he wants the gravitas of the situation to be taken seriously. He's tweeted, or I guess X'd many times and truthed many times that poll-related fraud, and anybody who participates in fraud will be prosecuted. Perhaps he wants to have the full force of the Trump image behind delivering that message. But I think also he enjoys bringing the press to his house. He usually will give a long, kind of unscripted sort of speech here. It's definitely a risk to do that. The last time he did it, it was a little bit rambling and it didn't really deliver. If you remember, a few months ago, he called one of these. We all kind of got around that there wasn't a lot that came from it. This one being so close to the election, we kind of are expecting something good, but I think he wants to use sort of the grandeur of that room to deliver this message. He doesn't want it to be a minor event or a minor announcement, at least at first glance.
Errol, really appreciate you talking to us as we wait for Donald Trump. What questions does he need to look out for, do you suspect, from the media here?
Well, the first questions are going to be, I think, what you guys were touching on in the last segment regarding Puerto Rico and the comedian who made those jokes. He's obviously going to have to face immediate questions. Why do you think Puerto Rico is a piece of garbage? Do you renounce whatever this guy's name is? So, I mean, obviously that has to happen. It's sort of ritualistic. I think that there might be questions he has to be careful with regarding Steve Bannon or regarding some of these figures who have been released. They'll obviously try to paint them as you know, devil incarnate and Donald Trump association with them. So he has, you know, obvious left-wing media questions. I think he definitely has to be careful on his tone and his delivery. He's done mixed on that. He's like in the debate with Kamala, he was a little bit, you know, grabbing the podium. You could tell that he was a little bit tense up there, and he's been much more calm and cool and relaxed through some other interviews and other situations. Obviously, a debate compared to an interview, it's a little bit more stressful. I can understand that. So he has to keep that cool, collected demeanor. We're only a week out. He looks presidential. He's carrying himself presidential. And so I think it's a good question, because what can he do to slip up here? What can he run into? And that's going to be probably, they'll probably ask him why he had a Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden. Did it evoke memories of 1939? Because we were all there. We remember that. But there's going to be those kind of like hit button questions. But otherwise, I don't think there's going to be much substance questions. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to ask him to break out his economic plan if he isn't already doing it up there. He might be asked about the rhetoric, though. He might be asked if he thinks that, you know, this rhetoric is damaging. And you saw him last night actually try to calm down some of his supporters who were chanting "lock her up" at Kamala, because, you know, he doesn't want that increased rhetoric from his side. So he might be able to take a leadership role in answering that question, which might be aimed as a hit question. But this is all postulation, right? I mean, it might end up being that he takes no questions. We're all in the dark right now.
Yes, although he usually can't stop himself, can he? But let's talk about these debates, of course, because this is a man who has refused to enter into more debates with Kamala Harris than that one in which he was widely assumed to have lost, really, been rattled by the jibes that Kamala Harris made about his crowd sizes and getting him into a very defensive and reflexive position, which, as you say, he does less in the sort of more relaxed media interviews, these podcasts that he's been going on, where he talks at length in quite a chummy way with various celebrities. But do you think it's damaging the fabric of American electoral politics that this sort of grand tradition that began with Nixon and JFK of doing 2 or 3 debates ahead of a general election for the candidates, that's been broken this year?
Well, there's 2 answers to that. At first, I think I would be remiss to not point out that Donald Trump wanted to do 4 debates, and he agreed off the bat to do 4 debates. However, some of those debates were going to be on Fox News, and some of those debates were going to have live audiences, and Kamala Harris was not going to have a live audience. She was only, keep in mind, one of the 2 interviewers in the debate was her sorority sister. I mean, that's crazy. If I said my fraternity brother is going to be interviewing us for the presidential election, that definitely breaks from tradition. I don't think John F. Kennedy did that. So Donald Trump was willing to have more debates. He just wasn't willing to do them all on her terms. Kamala Harris refused to do any debates on Donald Trump's terms, ergo now we're here. But we see it a little bit differently. Now, speaking to the second question, yes, it's a breakdown, but the breakdown, I think, if you look at it objectively, is technological. Back then, that was kind of the only, we went from radio to television. You went from fireside chat FDR to actually be able to see the 2 candidates for the first time. And now any, middle of the country citizen, regular fellow, to come home and watch the 2 candidates and actually judge them for themselves. And that was a special thing. But that started to become much, much less special into the 21st century when candidates can directly, I can pull my phone out and boom, I've got Donald Trump telling me what he believes in, and at the bottom asking me for $10. Like, I don't need to turn on the television and watch
Isn't that
the
a breakdown in the proper debate of what should happen?
It is.
Too often what we hear is Donald Trump sitting with some influencer celebrity who, quite frankly, is enamoured by the man, and they all talk very chummily together, agreeing with each other more and more vigorously. I mean, surely what the American people deserve is seeing 2 people go head-to-head who have profound disagreements.
I agree with that. I think Donald Trump also, to be fair, does a lot of hostile media, and he's done that for 8 years pretty consistently. He walks up to a press corps gaggle and stands there for 30 minutes answering questions. So, like, as though he's not put on trial is a little bit, I don't think is the right way to look at it, in the sense that the debate would be the trial. But I agree with you 100%. The debate format, especially to a British audience, which has a respect for, debate and, Chatham House rules and this and that, it's a total breakdown. And it's a huge failing for our country to not be able to do that. It's not a good thing. Both parties, both candidates in this cycle are guilty of this. However, I really think that if Kamala Harris wanted to do the debates, Trump agreed to 4, and she said, no, only on my terms, and Trump said, I'll do 1 on your terms. So I think the breakdown, it's tough to point to Trump when he agreed to 4 in the beginning.
Yeah, I didn't like the whole muting of the mics thing. I quite like it when there's a proper debate between candidates. But Errol, how important is Elon Musk's backing?
Oh, critical. I mean, again, so many people think that Elon Musk doesn't have a lot of love and support in America. So many people I know, look up to the guy. As an immigrant, I look at him as an example of what a great immigrant is and somebody who I would be inspired to work for or to be like. And I think a lot of young people, men and women, and a lot of older people also who remember the greatness of, I don't mean to say make America great again, but I think of my parents' generation watching, rocket ships go up in 1969, Sputnik when they were little kids. For them to see somebody all of a sudden have that same vision, John F. Kennedy, we're going to go to the moon, Elon Musk, we're going to go to Mars. Bringing him in and actually having him in the campaign is fantastic. And I think it's fantastic because people, would love to see him in that DOGE capacity, the Department of Government Efficiency. And he's going to come in ideally and start cutting the wasteful programs and the expenditures that are taking money away from real programs.
Look,
and
Errol, undoubtedly, Elon Musk is a hugely successful businessman. He's someone who has advanced spaceflight in a way that we haven't seen before. But something that the Harris campaign have said about Elon Musk in recent days is that he's something else, as well as being a hugely successful businessman, and that's an illegal immigrant. That he came to the United States on a student visa only to get a job, to start a business, on the wrong kind of visa. Isn't this huge hypocrisy from a campaign that is talking about securing the border and about safe legal migration?
Well, I have to push back because, Elon Musk came to Stanford University to do his PhD. And like many great entrepreneurs in the middle of that, came up with a better idea. And he definitely followed, like, it was reported, oh, this and this and this, but he did this all legally. He changed his status. He became a different type of green card holder. My father actually did the same thing when he came to America. He became a researcher in Palo Alto, and he wasn't a citizen yet. And when he decided to leave the university and work there, they helped him become a citizen. This is a very common thing in high-tech fields for people who are high intelligence, high worth individuals to the country. And Elon Musk definitely didn't break the law because he has all the legal paperwork and he's been naturalized as a U.S. citizen. Now, there might have been a wink, wink, nudge, nudge for the day that you're a student and you say, I'm no longer a student, I'm going to start working on my own project. Have you committed fraud there in your brain? I mean, it'd be a tough argument because every single great innovator from outside the country did it almost exactly this way. You come in onto one visa, you then apply for the change of visa, and you go forward. But it's a good Democrat.
It's the point, Erol, that there is a pretty restrictive form of visa, particularly for talented individuals, and both parties. Elon Musk has talked about this before himself, how hard it is. There's this sort of lottery for talented people if they want visas to come and work, particularly in high-paying tech industry jobs in the United States. Isn't it a bit ironic that yes, you're focusing here on some of the peculiar particularities of transitioning from one visa to another? There's grey area there. There's certainly grey area. The moment to which Elon Musk stopped being a student and started in a job, did he have the right kind of visa? Well, no one's provided the evidence.
Well, nobody's provided the evidence that he has committed any crime either. They just insinuated he's committed a crime. He has a U.S. passport. He went through the legal processes, and definitely in the eyes of the U.S. government, he didn't commit a crime or he would be in jail. Just like his sweepstakes that he's running isn't a crime, even though they're trying to knock him down for it. They haven't actually sent any police to arrest him because it's not a crime. If he actually committed grave if he had grave immigration fraud, then something would have obviously been brought to light. So unless any evidence can show that, it's just hearsay and sort of slander against one of the greatest immigrants in American history.
Now, Errol, one of the subjects that comes up time and time and again, particularly over here, is Trump's attitude towards Ukraine and Russia's war in Ukraine. People are genuinely concerned as to how much Trump will back Ukraine.
Well, Trump will back Ukraine sternly and with the full force of the U.S. military in the sense that we're going to get a peace deal done, and part of that peace deal is going to be concessions on both sides. Ukraine is unfortunately going to have to concede some of the territory they're lost. This is the real world, and Russia is going to have to concede that the future of Ukraine is probably going to have a much stronger U.S. security umbrella around it going forward. Western Ukraine, I'm referring to. Donald Trump's a deal maker, so the idea that we're going to go in there and just keep throwing bodies at the Russian bear as though Russia's not going to absorb them all forever, I mean, it's ghoulish behavior. Donald Trump is a man of peace. He's a peace candidate. He's ran on peace, and he's fully intends to bring that peace. It doesn't mean we don't support the Ukrainian people, and it doesn't mean that we don't want the heroes who defended that country to have their due. But the idea that you can perpetually have a war with one of the preeminent nuclear powers in the world and having incursions on their border is just mind-blowingly unethical and dangerous, and the citizens of Europe and America are all in danger by this event, not to speak the citizens of Russia and Ukraine, the citizens who I'm sure are innocent in both countries, by the way, citizens. And so bringing people to peace and bringing peace negotiations to the forefront, I think is going to be a positive thing for the Ukrainian people. And the amount of investment, by the way, from these, BlackRock and other sort of investment vehicles, they're going to come in, and they've already made deals to rebuild Ukraine, whatever that means. There's going to be a lot of money pouring in there because there's a lot of rebuilding to do.
OK, well, Erol Morkoc, the chief strategist for Republicans Overseas UK, a massive thank you for talking to us for a little bit longer than I think any of us expected while we're waiting for Donald Trump to appear here at his Mar-a-Lago resort for this press conference.
We really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, let's speak to the former Democratic